Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial in my digital sketching series. This time we're going to be doing rocks, and I'm pulling from sort of looking at rocks through the lens or through the eyes of sort of like a digital sculptor would. So a lot of these are ZBrush sculpts, as well as you have some photographs here, and a lot of these are just fantastic examples of just the right amount of where it feels realistic, but it also feels somewhat stylized or, made up, if you will. So I kind of like that. I want to push it further and I use that term loosely, style, right? What is that? Well, for me, I just see it as sort of the result of, a series of choices, right? How you like to make the line, or how you paint the strokes, and what colors you use, and there that ends up becoming a style. But I want to consciously now make the effort to stylize sort of the way I make the shapes or the forms. So credit to all the various artists here. I'm not trying to steal your work or anything, but there's a lot of fantastic Peter. I have a lot of Peter Koenig's, I think that's how you pronounce it, a lot of his 3D sculpts here. Again, I'm just using them for reference. These are sort of going to be jumping off points. So let's get started, right? So I'm going to make a new layer, and oops, what's going on here? I'm going to make a new layer. Just make sure I'm recording. Record. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Let's see. Make a new. Just gonna put some of this off to the side for now, so we can get going here. So. Now let's sort of reinforce some of the basic principles or ideas here, at least for my goal. So the goal I want for this, or at least for you that's listening to this, it's like I want to be able to communicate strong shapes. And that includes, form, good form language, as well as sort of interpretation. Oops. Or style, if you will. And if you look online and sort of type in, cool rock formations, or, stylized rocks or stuff like that, I imagine you'll come across actual drawings or sketches of people doing, maybe it's like a background for, a cartoon or animation. And that's where you kind of see where a lot of people spend a lot of time on something as simple as rocks, or something that's like, oh, okay, that's just a rock in the background, but there's a lot of thought and design that goes into that. And I like to start off with this when I start my classes. I like to start with something simple like this, where it's like rocks or trees or whatever, plants and stuff. That's easier to kind of digest or get started with, right? So strong shapes. And you probably can already guess where I'm going to go with this is, right? Everything can be made up of sort of the three basic shapes, right? So we have, box, triangle, circle, and that sort of translates into, when we add in sort of the form, we have, sort of that kind of idea, right? We have a cube, or maybe we have like a cone, right? That kind of idea, and sort of the sphere, if you will. So, that's the first problem, right? Is sort of figuring out, how do I break this down? What am I looking at? It's comprised of these simple shapes. So you'll see me sort of start to draw this out. I'll do it right now. I'll take something like this, and so draw this guy over here, and I want to sort of figure out what is that initial shape going to be. What, and then how does it break down into sort of the interior shapes? Maybe it has sort of like these jetting out, little shapes that kind of point out that way. Maybe this is starting to look almost like a spaceship, right? Just by that sort of shape language. But figuring out what is that overall sort of gesture. Maybe this is sort of my the long side, and I'm sort of adding in these little generalized shapes. I'm overly exaggerating or oversimplifying, but I can always build off of this. I don't have to copy that. And that's you for me, it's not about copying what's there. I want to sort of take that vocabulary that this artist has come up with and sort of build off of that, right? Bridge off of that. So maybe we have more of a vertical sort of, right? Like that one below it, right? Sort of. Same thing, kind of figure out what is the overall shapes. So I might, oops, just realized I'm drawing on white, so I'll have to. So initially, maybe the base of the first shape is, something like that. That's sort of my graphic, shape there. And then adding form in, right? Once I start to add in secondary overlapping sort of graphic shapes of some sort, I can start to add in the form. So maybe, I want to tell the viewer that it's sort of doing something like that, that there's some, if I was to rub my finger across it, it goes alongside these forms. Just like how if I rub my finger here, I can, sort of do that. I can sort of draw these sort of form lines, right, over it. Again, I'm being very simple, but you get the. Hopefully, you can kind of get the idea of what I'm going after for that. So that's the first tier of that. Now, once I kind of get, sort of beyond that point, now it's like, the style to me comes into play when I want to, how much do I want to push this further? Like, how much can I get away with it being, maybe it's a thick line here and it gets really thick here. Maybe I get into where the lighting, where some of this is maybe, we start to see it where it's lit in such a way where maybe it's like very low light and it's dark and such. I think value can be part of the. It's not just about the line defining its style. Maybe it's the way it's lit. It's value. So all of those design principles come into play, right? If you've ever taken an intro to design course, Design 101 or any of those principles of design, usually they'll do is sort of go over like a whole list, right? You'll see like, oh, okay, design 101. And it's like you have line and shape and perspective, right? Or depth, right? And you have positive, negative. Positive, neg. Curve versus straights. You have like sort of these principles, but to me, what they all encompass, right? If we sort of, what is the bottom line, right? If we sort of add all these up or whatever, what is the general theme? It's contrast, right? At least is the way I see it. We have maybe a contrast of, just a shape language. So maybe, the style of this one is more sort of these round, arcs, right? Imagine like a rock formation where it's like these round kind of almost like silos, versus maybe this one has like these hard edges, right? So everything's sort of orthogonal, which is what you would associate with rocks. But I think in terms of a sketch, who's to say that you couldn't have these curved shapes for a rock per se, right? That might be kind of going against the grain as far as communicating what we associate with a rock to be, but I imagine there's a lot of ways you could sell that this is a rock other than just by using straight edges. You could use interior details to help sell some of that hard edge, or maybe it's the value, right? The value pass or the textures to help sell that form language. So now we get into sort of what is when we look at sort of these basic shapes, what is sort of the underlying, like a square, I would argue is maybe stable, right? What is the underlying subtext of, or what we associate with some descriptions, right? Stable or grounded, right? Sturdy, balanced. And these are just like general ideas. By no means is this gospel, but we could argue, these would be more likely applicable to a square than, a circle, right? Like a circle, would you say a circle is stable? Yeah, you could argue, but is it more stable than a square? Probably not, right? So let's go into a circle, right? So a circle, I would argue, is soft. It's bulbous, whatever. I'm not good at. You can see I'm not good at spelling. You could also say maybe this is balanced, but in a different way. Balanced, or equal, or So it's these kind of descriptions could be blended across, but imagine a character that was made up of just these sort of orthogonal lines versus a character that was drawn just with these sort of curved lines. Maybe this this would be applied to, you know, a friendly, or maybe this is, you know, maybe a not so friendly, not as friendly, I should say, right? And really, what I'm doing is I'm just providing an idea for you to at least look at it through that lens of like, where's the contrast just by the inherent shapes. If everything can be drawn with these simple shapes, right, or these simple forms, you know, well, you know, where's the contrast, you know, at that point? Like, you know, if we make up a whole character of these, you know, these round spheres and circles, we might, you know, we're trying to sell, maybe it's a you know, an evil character. This might not be the way to go. That's not to say you couldn't make it work, but it's something to consider, right? Now we have right, we also have sort of the other, let me just sort of move this over here so that's easier. Do a little surgery. Right. And then so we have now the triangle or cone. You know, you also have sort of the soda can, which is basically a circle with a square, or a sphere with a box, right? So you have that sort of idea. So we can already start to, you know, angular, sharp, you know, edge, edgy, you know. So right, you know, just by those kind of context, that kind of context, right, applying some of those descriptions, even though as loose as they are, they might, you know, may not apply, you might disagree with me or whatever, I'm just already dictating a contrast. So when I'm drawing, you know, you know, when I lay in, you know, I'm drawing in my rocks, right? You know, it's like, this is sort of like a go-to draw rock from memory, like kind of sketch. I always end up doing, right? It's like, you know, well, maybe I'm gonna make everything this kind of, or maybe it's all this, you know, or maybe it's sort of everything's boxy, you know, maybe it's got all these sort of horizontal edges to it. You know, I could play up sort of that kind of visual motif, right? It's like a repeating pattern throughout the design. You think about it like this, like, you know, you're trying to say something else about the character through its surroundings. So imagine if I'm designing the background landscapes in the movie Cars, right? You know, maybe when they're at a certain, in the beginning, Act 2, the beginning of Act 3 from 2, maybe there's a big turning point, so the background sort of reflects a little bit of that turning point as well, as far as maybe there's some dark, you know, contrast going on, or the shapes get more angular because the main character is going through a struggle or trying to overcome a major obstacle. You know, so those little design kind of considerations could really sell that story, right? Even further, give it that extra, you know, sort of subtext. And I think that's important. As a designer, you're always trying to take advantage of everything that you can manipulate or, you know, communicate, right? So the little, you know, rocks in the background could help the overall visual look, right? Let me just check my time. So this is a quick overview. You know, we want to always, our checklist, decide to go after sort of the basic shape. And I look at this as sort of the overall perimeter, right? Or silhouette. I always misspell silhouette. Let me just. and then we apply form. And once we kind of get a general feel, then we start to apply, okay, what is it? What do we want to manipulate? What is sort of the chosen? And we start to go in and carve into it, erase into it as we, maybe this is going to be sort of all this kind of hard edge, and then maybe it has a contrast of maybe this rock in the foreground, or as it comes near camera, gets a little bit more of sort of a round edge, right? It's just fun to kind of play around with just how how just that contrast can help create a different look or feel, right, to it. All right, so I'll put that one off to the side. Let's get into some sketching. You can watch me sketch for a little bit. I'm gonna create a new document. I'm gonna work maybe like, let's see, 3,500 by 2,500, something like that. Just trying to keep it like roughly about like a 8.5 by 11 kind of piece of paper. In fact, if you wanted to, you could just pick that default preset, which is like US paper and then letter. It's kind of a go-to, a nice one. But I like to work at a little bit of lower res, just because I find it's just quicker, less issues. But if I wanted to, I could still go in here and adjust it. So, all right. Now I'm gonna stick to black and white. We're not gonna be covering color at all. Maybe I'll do some just as an effect, but for the most part, I'm just gonna sort of jump around and just play. Just kind of just see what happens. I'm gonna start with a base of a neutral tone, maybe like a 50%. And for me, I like the brush to feel similar to like a ballpoint pen, but maybe not as thin, or maybe like a pencil. Right? And then I'll even pick like a value that's not so stark. The black can sometimes be a little too much. All right. Let's see. So this is really simple, but I like it. Feels solid, and it has interesting lighting and plane changes, right? Like when form sort of changes direction, right? If we're rubbing our finger, we're going to be sort of rubbing at many turning points across that. So I kind of like that vocabulary. So I want to kind of play with that. So sort of just knock in sort of that perimeter, if you will. Right. Just allow yourself to see what happens. I'm not so concerned with trying to get anything exact or whatever. I just want to figure out like a direction, if you will, like an artistic interpretation, right? Just kind of like, oh, that's cool, like let's run with it. We kind of reach that point. That's so just kind of getting a feel for it. I'm not, it's okay. There's a lot of lines that's kind of happening as a result of sort of creating these little tick marks. Or for me, I like to lay down a little bit of chaos and then carve into that or adjust that. So maybe I'll kind of, we're in Photoshop, right? We have the benefits of working on layers, right? I have this on its own layer, right? So I can kind of go in and resize it and mess with it and so forth, and definitely take advantage of that. I think it's, as long as it doesn't encumber you too much, with too many choices, because that can kind of happen with digital. You can get caught up in with, the what if factor of like, I have to, try it and see if it works, and there's just too many options. So, all right, there you go. I like to rotate the canvas. You've probably seen if you've seen my other videos, I kind of sort of do that almost too much. And it's just my way of sort of following, that, the way I would draw on paper with just a regular pen, or pencil or whatnot. I always be sort of rotating that page to get a sort of a, when I draw lines this way, I want to rotate the page so I can comfortably draw that. If you're drawing on a Cintiq, then you just sort of, you can kind of rotate in, you can actually rotate the Cintiq itself to do that. But in Photoshop, I'm drawing with a tablet, which I'm using right now. I'll just go ahead and just hit R to rotate the canvas. Right, so you got a little bit of, now, the thing to note is really, I'm just going to sort of it's really this, right? This sort of shape, right? How I'm going to sort of start to carve into it just in terms of a drawing, right? I'm just gonna, I like the idea that this thing has a really strong base, so I might even kind of jet it out a little bit. Everything's suggestive, I'm not here to create a pretty, a mechanical drawing or anything. It's some sort of, it's really just a suggestion, right? And I'm avoiding jumping the gun too much. I want to keep it in the realm where I'm just playing with line. I don't want to get too much into value. You can, like, if you're more comfortable, right? Some of you are more comfortable sort of using value to turn planes. So what I'm doing is I'm just thinking about, sort of this form language of me going from here, rubbing my finger, and sort of, how does it go over these sort of forms, right? That's sort of the idea. If you sort of, there you go. And when, things might get a little chaos, or you're not sure or whatever, just erase into it, or step away from it, start a new sketch. I like to, I know artists like Feng Zhu and all that, they're big on this, and I've definitely taken a page out of that book where sort of sketch out, work on multiple sort of sketches at once. Especially when it comes to design, I think it's good to always be, I think there's something to be said about when you take on something else, and then you sort of take a break from this. Whatever's happening there, good and bad, you're taking a break from it, and you're just sort of building, starting something new. So you're just like, oh, it's fresh, it's a clean slate, and I can always just jump back to it, just kind of mess with it. It's kind of interesting. Now here I love the, you have sort of these diagonals happening. Well, I want to think about sort of the overall form as I see it. So maybe this is sort of the main sort of edge of this box, if you will. If I was to contain this thing into like an invisible box, this would sort of be, the edge of this box, if you will, right? If I was to contain it around it, sort of, that's where it's going to be. So again, if don't be afraid, shrink it down. It's for me, it's extremely important to not get too, committing too early, or I just want to keep it suggestive. Just roll with it. Just see what happens. I use erasing it's more like carving, or I'm erasing out so I can overlap, if you're constantly erasing because you're correcting mistakes per se, like in the sense like, oh, I'm unsure, so you erase it and try it again. I think that's the bad side of erasing, it's like, I think erasing should be more of thinking of like a sculptor, where you sort of add on clay, take away a little bit, add on some, take away, and that's why I look at it. However, sometimes I'll get caught up in, trying to correct something, or getting nuanced, or getting caught up in the nuance of possibilities, right? You're just trying one after the other, and there's a time and place for that, But I think for a good sketch, it's sort of, it's there just to. Recording, at least for me, the way I see sketches, it's really just a moment in time, or an idea, conveying an idea, selling an idea. So I want to make this a little bit more of a, just because I want to break away sort of like the shape is becoming too suggestive. You know what I mean? So I want to sort of break that, and at least for me, like, I don't want it to be like all about some kind of Freudian slip or whatever. So there you go. Maybe this side too comes out. So, all right, and then I'll pick another one. This is cool. I like that. It's like a. So move. Sometimes I might just have to just kind of give it more space. Yeah. All right, I can turn these off. Whoops. Same thing, I'm just gonna block in my shapes here. for me, well, with this kind of drawing and stuff, a lot of times it's just like, weirdly enough, I find, like, at least for me, the habit goes is I try to rush it because whatever, I just jump right in, and then at a certain point I have to, like, slow down and just make good decisions and commit. Just like, okay, that's I want that shape to do that, and make it that kind of thing. It's just I think that's a good reminder, at least from my students. A lot of times, I want them to, moving faster doesn't necessarily mean it might make you faster in the sense, like, okay, I'm moving faster, and then therefore I get a result that much quicker. But the decisions, you're just making the bad decisions or the quicker. So it's moving faster is not, can definitely, in some instances, will be the way to go. But I think making good decisions, good economy, I think is. So to make this, I started to realize it's like a mushroom. So making it smaller. This is a very, it's got some very simple shapes to it. It's almost, I kind of like it. I like that. It's just something odd, right, about that. So I just. I'll probably end up just doing some kind of like a flat, just to help get it out of that flat. Or to just give me a base, I guess. I'll just go like a flat bottom. Alright, so I've kind of got my general shapes here. Right, I'll go back to that that first one. See here, right? And now I can start to really almost get a little bit more clear, right? I can go in and erase out just the areas where I want to make more more defined, right? Just have it so that it really there's not, it doesn't have to be clean, but I mean just so that there's not too much of that chaos from all the sketch lines happening. And now you can start to really push sort of that language. You know, maybe I want to you know, push a little bit of some of that vocabulary there. You know, so the sort of the way the shapes are arranged or the forms are interlocking with each other. Maybe I can sort of really push that. And things, you know, get compromised, and that's okay. You know what I mean? It doesn't, you know, maybe things don't necessarily line up the way you originally intended. You know, just kind of just see what happens. You know, run with it. You know, maybe it could be, you know, if this was like a real, like, oh, like a job, yeah, I would be doing multiple versions. I would take advantage of what's happening in one, duplicate it, kind of explore that, and just, you know, knock out as many variations that I could for within the time that I have, right? So it can be a lot of fun, but you know, exploring sort of that what happens visually, sort of when it develops. So. Right, think about that form language, right? Like, you know, what's for me, like, I'll start to think about the overall shadow side. So the way it's lit here, I can almost start to block in, right? Start to mass in those shadows. But I feel like I'd rather do it just with value rather than just lines. So what I'll do is I'll still indicate it with some line, but I'm gonna let the value do most of it. So I just want it for maybe the deeper, darker areas, right? So I'll take like, I'll lower my brush and start to, I'm just gonna sort of fill this in. Actually, you know what, I'll do it this way where it's more like a 20. So I want it to have some kind of positive shape, and then I'll do 40%. So the 40 will be natural, you know, 40 is going to be darker, right? It's kind of like taking, like, if you ever buy a set of markers like Prismacolor markers or Copic markers, and you'll see they'll have like 10% grade, 20%, 30%, 40%, so on. Sort of like that. I'm like basically just grabbing the different markers and sort of filling it in. Right. And I'm not worried about going, this is not about being perfect by any means. I'm just, because it's just a sketch, and just trying to get a feel for it. How it's gonna go. All right. I'll take maybe like white, maybe like something close to white, maybe like an 85%, and just sort of, so I'm gonna paint out like a white kind of background into it. This will help like bring it forward, right? Sort of like give it a background, so all those values now are starting to almost lift off the page or come forward just by nature of the values and how they're sort of working together. I'm doing this all in one layer. I'm not like using any I could. Right. And I can still go in and maybe push. Kind of carve into it. I'll take a background color, and now I can sort of start to paint in maybe where I think the highlights would go into this. I'm not really, honestly, I'm not even like the model here that this artist has. I'm not really like following it anymore. Just sort of, and I look at it and like, oh yeah, like it sort of acts as a reminder at that point. Glazing some atmosphere. I did the reverse, glazing some shadows. And when all those fills right now, I've been painting with like all kind of transparency and all that, but I can still go in and carve right into just using just opaque, making 100% and just going in and just with black and color picking the colors that they have there. I can start getting a little bit of the reflected light. Sort of catching on the other side. It's kind of cool just to kind of, just see what happens. Sometimes because you can always just carve right into it. There's really no, it's okay. You know what I mean? Like you can, it's just a rock. Anyways, all right, I'll do the other ones. Just kind of jam on some of the others. Let's see what my time is now. All right. Where is that one? Is down. I can't. I'm looking for it. It's like a needle in the haystack. I know it's there, but my eyes aren't locking in on it. It's on the right hand side, maybe. Oh, there it is. It's on the left hand side. Ah, okay. Alright, so I'll just go ahead and start to knock this one in. I'll just turn that one off. Now, obviously these are, artwork done by an artist, so, we're sort of using that as a reference, and that might seem kind of weird, but I found my teachers used to make us sort of look at sketchbooks of others, and we would draw what they were drawing, sort of, they call it master copies in a lot of ways, so I think there's something to be said about that. That's a great way to, sometimes mimicry is the way to learn, it's just to kind of look at it for what it is and try to emulate that artist just by interpreting what you see, and it's not about being right, just just going through that sort of that exercise. I think there's a lot to be said about that. I know a lot of self-taught artists, essentially that's what they're doing. They're sort of looking at what inspires them and just try to do what they do. I think the problem is if they start to become just good copiers rather than interpreting and figure out their sort of what works for them, and changing it up, so at least is the way I see it. I mean, even people that aren't that go to school end up sort of that. There's a lot of that as well. I think we're all guilty at some point of being too much like what we're looking at. So, to each his own. You just sort of. Again, I'm just not being too careful or any of that. I really like what's happening just as a design, just interesting. But I mean, I'm gonna have in the efforts of trying not to be so literal in sort of my version. I don't want to, I want to, I want to break. At some point, I need to depart from like looking at it and so I'm not just copying, to some extent. Again, if you're just starting off or you're trying to, don't, that's okay. Try it out. Try to, if it's copying one to one, it's gonna get you better. Then try it. And if you've already done that, then try to, add 10% of your own to it, and just keep upping that every time you do it. Try to increase that, or maybe it's not so much about copying what you see, but maybe copying how they did these kind of overlaps, or how they did their textures or the value. So you pick one thing that you copy, but everything else is sort of your own. That's sort of the way I look at how the ones that do it correctly, you get away with it, versus the ones that sort of just go one to one for everything, and then it looks too much like the artists are copying. So I think just taking a few things and running with it, and then just adding your own to it. But in the effort of just trying to learn, you're not putting in your portfolio. I imagine these are just exercises. So try everything out. What's to say one is? Some people learn better by mimicking, or just trying to do what they see and then adjusting as they go. Anyways, I digress on that. You get the point. Let me see. So might be easier if I just flatten this out as far as the base is concerned, just to help. It's almost like they're alive, this is like father, son, like son and younger son. they're on the run, So it's just have fun. I think that's sometimes myself, I'm like, does this interest me? Like, how do I make this interesting? Why am I, so. All right, I'll start to add in just some values, just wash it in. I'll do like a 30. Maybe this one I'm gonna be up a bit. It's kind of fun. I like this. This is just interesting. Just like things become surprising. I like that. I like when that happens. And it's when I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that. I love when that's like the end result. Let's just go ahead and start to this background. Maybe I'll go a little bit. I should keep going dark. Okay. Oh, that's why this is stupid. Sometimes I forget I have it's set to like 90% or something. Like, it's always good to just reset. I'm just gonna carve into right. We'll take some of this and let's do this one. All right. All right, just come back to if I do that, let me just add a little bit of contrast. To this. So it's using overlay. Just gonna and now I'm just painting. Oops. At a certain point with the sketch, you know, everything's there. So you just color pick what's there and you just, you know, you just keep working it. I think that's when when you really start to really play with what's happening there, and you know, you're sort of, you threw something against the wall, you see it's something's there, now you're sort of manipulating it at this point. You're trying to make what's there but retaining the good parts and getting rid of bad, or adjusting the quote unquote bad parts. That's what I see it. So that's, at least this is how I think about it. Right. So I mean, I can get carried away. This is like, just at this point, it's kind of cool. It's fun to just plug in some, you know, play with some graphic design now. Like, what are these shapes doing? And, you know, does it get more broken up as I get down here? You know, I kind of think I can kind of play like that. And it doesn't really have a context at this point, in the sense like, okay, this shapes relate to this. I'm not thinking like that, but you could, you know, you could be thinking like, okay, these shapes mimic the shapes found on this character or in this environment, or so there's some reason or continuity to it or some sort. A lot of fun. The more I look at this, I realize it's a little too suggestive. Oh well. What are you gonna do, right? Something you just... So I can kind of just... There you go. Maybe cut into it a little bit. Just to... I'm sort of looking at the reference or the model there, so when at this point probably best to not do that, to come back to this guy. Alright, I'm going to try to beef up a little bit. I feel like I've drawn this so many times, and I need to flip it. Just make it my own. Maybe it's just there you go. Kind of accentuating some areas over others, or just finding ways to make it more interesting. There you go. Just kind of breaking up. Yeah. Just kind of breaking that shape. Maybe it's trying to make it feel a little bit more just like something else rather than, you know. There you go. Let's take a look at some. Let's try. Oops. I'm gonna put it back there. So I'm kind of just, going back and trying things, just to see like, what if we do that, or what if we carve into it. And some things that I'm like indecisive, so it can work against me if this is, if I gotta be, if I didn't think I have the time, I'm not gonna do some of that unless I knew exactly what to adjust to make it work. So you just, oh, that's kind of cool. Like maybe it has like, just right. Just find other ways to give it little points of interest or contrast. Right. It's just, that's all that is. Just kind of like accentuating. Edges and just with contrast of values, right? And things kind of get lost or abstract, and especially in this one, so that's okay. We can, you just deal with it as as you best you can. I mean, it's just rocks. Who's to say that I can't do something like that? All right. Last but not least. Just kind of tidying up this one a little bit. Just adding a little bit of there you go. Alright, let's do this guy. So Right. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure my brush is set to how I like it. Still got our time. All right. Trying to keep these videos maybe a shorter, you know. I like to let me get the 50. Why is it so light? Oh, because that's why. It's the value. Right. It's weird. It just keeps doing. All right. There you go. And just kind of, you know, playing with that overall shape, you know, just sort of finding ways to make it work, but more so, you know, make it interesting to, you know, to how it is and so forth. It's an odd shape, so it gets a little kind of, you know, tricky and so forth. But let me see, maybe this is. Go. Yeah, that could be kind of cool. Just kind of make it a little bit more sort of pushing sort of the thick to thin stem there. Alright, I'm going to start adding some value. This one, maybe I want to try something different. Let's try the reverse. So I'll do overlay. Let's try that. So I'm using overlay just to kind of, it's basically coloring with black and or white in order to, at different percentages of opacity, so that way I get sort of the overlapping of those values. So if it's a 10%, I go over it once, then I double up, I'll go over it again. Now it's sort of like a 20%. And with overlay, the more, every time I go over with it, it punches it even further and towards. So if I'm painting with white, every time I go back over it, even at 10%, it's going to go closer and closer to white. So it's just a nice quick way to. Alright. Now I'm gonna switch to painting opaquely, if you will. I guess you could say I use that loosely, but just trying to. I don't want to carve into it. I use these backgrounds as a way to sort of create a positive and negative sort of, by painting this white back here, what it does, this feels like it comes forward, if you will. So when I say positive, negative, I'm really just talking about it coming, sort of forward in space. It's coming positive, or if it's going negative, it's going backwards in space, so that kind of idea. And I believe that's just how sort of the push and pull or gestalt, right, of shapes can work. They sort of interact with each other. It's light pushes its dark pushes its light, sort of this back and forth relationship that's happening. I'm gonna take my overlay and just Alright. Another way to kind of accentuate or push your forms or push what's happening there is what I'll do is I'll take my smudge tool, which is essentially this. If you look at my this little tool here with the finger, take that and pick like a middle 50% strength, and making sure that it's a soft kind of feel to it. What I do is I can kind of move, you know, ever so slightly. I can push those pixels in a different kind of area. You know what I mean? And then what I'll do is I'll go back in and, because it kind of softens it a little bit. Again, just playing around, messing with it, why not? And there you go. I mean, this guy. Let's see. Wait, where's? Oh, there he is. Okay. Just clean a little bit of this up. I almost want to do something like that just as a contrast. Maybe it has like this round top kind of thing. Oops, it's doing some kind of weird color thing. I don't know why it's doing that. Anyways, all in all, you can kind of see this is really simple. It's just a way of quickly jotting down some idea, getting some value in there, getting a read, using the reference as just a source of inspiration, and also as a waypoint to, if you do get kind of lost, kind of go back, look at what you're seeing, and try to address and slow down, and put your take into it. What is it you're trying to do with it? Maybe it's just about orchestrating some interesting play of shapes working against each other or working with each other. Or maybe it is more about making it feel solid, or a certain kind of texture to it. I'm not really getting too much into the actual textures and stuff or so forth, but you can kind of indicate in some areas, like for instance here, if I take this further, I can start to increase my value and start to give a little bit of a faux texture, if you will, just in some areas, adding more form lines or cracks and so forth. And but I think that what's most important is sort of solidifying what's happening with the shapes. How are they playing against each other? We'll be getting next coming videos. We'll getting to color and texture and so forth. But we'll continue on with more sort of organic subject matter and so forth. But if you follow along this far, thanks. I appreciate it, and please show some support if you can. Please like, comment, share, subscribe, all that jazz. I enjoy making these. I enjoy just hearing the feedback or getting feedback from it. So yeah. All right, guys. Again, thanks so much. I'm out. Peace out.